For 3 years, California had a plan to take away your right to buy a new gas car. As of this summer, that plan is dead, and the way it died is something almost nobody saw coming. Here's what it really was: not a goal, not a someday, a machine built quietly by a state agency designed to decide for you what kind of car you're even allowed to buy. Officials called it a clean air standard. What it functioned as was a countdown clock on the internal combustion engine. The number is this: under the rule, 35% of all new cars sold in California had to be zero emission by model year 2026, climbing to 100% by 2035. That rule came from the California Air Resources Board, CARB, say CARB, the state's unelected air agency, with the blessing of an EPA waiver and the full backing of Governor Gavin Newsom. 11 other states and Washington, D.C. had already signed on. And there's an order signed the same afternoon this ban supposedly died, one that tells you it was never really buried at all. They named it a standard for a reason, because if they'd called it what it actually was, there would have been a fight. Here's what that plan actually forced. Advanced Clean Cars 2, the formal name, didn't ask automakers to try. It set hard percentages with dates attached. By 2026, more than a third of every new car sold in the state had to be battery electric, plug-in hybrid, or hydrogen. By 2030, the line climbed past two-thirds. By 2035, gas was simply off the new car menu. Used gas cars could still be sold, but the new lot? Locked. And because California is so large, automakers don't build one car for California and another for everyone else. Therefore, the rule reached far past the state line before a single other legislature voted on it. That's the part that makes the next detail matter. That's the rule. Here's what they called it: an emissions standard, a clean air measure, the kind of thing California has set since the days of Nixon. But a standard you can meet by building a better engine is one thing. A rule that says you cannot sell the engine at all is not a standard. It's a ban. And it didn't stop at the border. 11 states plus D.C. adopted it, which means roughly 40% of the entire U.S. car market was quietly handed the same deadline. No Congress voted on that. No national election turned on it. A state board wrote it, and nearly half the country inherited it. Call it whatever softens it. Functionally, one agency was setting the car policy for tens of millions of people who never got a ballot. Strip the label, and you can follow who is left holding the bag. Buyers were told to plan around a 2026 deadline. Automakers retooled assembly lines and supply chains for percentages that were now law. Dealers stocked inventory against a clock. And every dollar of that retooling lands the same place every compliance cost lands: in the sticker price you pay. So this was never abstract. But this is where most people stopped reading the story, and it's exactly where it gets stranger. Because hold the date this got signed, June 12th, because the same day matters more than the signature. Everyone assumed a rule this big, this embedded, with this much money behind it, was permanent. It wasn't. And here's the part that should concern every driver in America, because this rule should never have been killable, and it was. Congress reached for a tool called the Congressional Review Act, CRA, a fast-track power to wipe out a federal rule with a simple majority. The catch: the Nonpartisan Government Accountability Office, the GAO, ruled in March 2025 that California's waiver wasn't even a rule the CRA could touch. The Senate's own parliamentarian agreed. In roughly 50 years, no EPA waiver had ever been overturned this way. Lawmakers did it anyway. The Senate voted 51 to 44, going around their own referee. Now walk onto a California dealer lot right now and try to figure out whether the car you're buying plays by next year's rules or no rules at all. Nobody on that lot can tell you cleanly, because the policy was killed by a procedure half of Washington said couldn't be used. That uncertainty is the real product here. If you think a signature in Washington ends this, you haven't been paying attention. Here's the order I flagged at the top. June 12th, the same afternoon Trump's signature killed the ban, Governor Newsom signed his own, directing CARB and 4 more state agencies to draft a new path to the same 2035 target, with formal recommendations due that August. The same day, an Attorney General Rob Bonta, joined by 10 other states, filed suit calling the repeal illegal, meaning the death itself is now in front of a federal judge. So watch the staircase. Today, a court fight over whether the ban was even legally killed. Tomorrow, a redrafted rule with softer dates and fatter incentives. Eventually, the same 100% by 2035 target wearing a different name. The door didn't close. It just changed which room it's in. Supporters will say California was just defending its own air, exercising a right it's held for 50 years, and cleaner air is a real goal. Nobody serious argues otherwise. But there's a difference between a state cleaning up its own backyard and a state board writing the new car rules for 40% of the country with no national vote attached. That's not a state protecting itself. That's a state legislating for everyone else through a regulatory side door. A rule that big should win at the ballot box or not at all. Instead, it lived by waiver and died by procedure. And now it's trying to come back by executive order. None of that is how voters decide anything. So go back to where we started. The plan to take away your right to buy a new gas car is, on paper, dead. But the agency that wrote it is drafting its replacement. The governor who launched it relaunched it the same afternoon. And 11 states are in court trying to bring the original back to life. That's the real story under the headline. Not a clean win, not a clean loss. A ban that learned to move quietly. Today it's a lawsuit. Tomorrow it's a new rule with a friendlier name. The target never moved. So ask yourself this one in the comments. Who actually decides what you're allowed to drive? A voter or a procedure most people can't even name? Because the ban didn't die. It went quiet.